There was a time when the loudest place in a shopping mall wasn't the food court, and it wasn't the movie theater. It was a dark, glowing room filled with flashing lights, loud electronic sounds, and rows of arcade machines that never seemed to turn off. And if you ever stepped inside even for a second, you could feel the energy instantly. Kids and teenagers crowded around machines, people watching each other play, coins dropping, buttons smashing, and every screen showing a different world. And if you wanted fun, if you wanted competition, if you wanted to feel something exciting for just a few minutes, there was only one place you needed to go: the arcade. And the strange thing is that for a long time, this wasn't something special. It was normal. It was part of everyday life. Almost every mall had one, and almost everyone had a memory connected to it. But then something changed, and today most of them are gone, and many people don't even remember when it happened. So what really happened to mall arcades? How did something so alive, so popular, and so deeply connected to youth culture disappear almost completely? To understand that, you have to go back to a time before powerful home gaming, before online multiplayer, before smartphones. Back to a time when, if you wanted to play the best games, you couldn't just stay at home. You had to go somewhere. You had to enter a place designed for games, and that place was the arcade. Arcades were not just rooms with machines. They were environments built to pull you in. The lights were brighter, the sounds were louder, everything was designed to grab your attention. Each machine had its own style, its own colors, its own challenge. And as you walked through the room, you could hear dozens of games at once, creating a kind of noise that somehow felt exciting instead of overwhelming. And every machine was a new opportunity. A racing game where you could sit behind a wheel, a fighting game where you could test your skill against another person, a shooting game where speed and reaction mattered. And every time you played, you paid a coin, sometimes two, gave you a short moment, maybe a few minutes, maybe less, and then it was over. And if you wanted to continue, you had to pay again. And that simple system changed everything. It made every second feel important. Every move mattered. Every mistake had a cost. You focused more, you reacted faster, you tried harder. Because losing didn't just mean losing the game, it meant losing your coins. And that pressure created excitement. It made the experience feel real. Arcades quickly became places where skill mattered, where people competed not just for fun, but for recognition. High-score boards turned games into something bigger. If your name was at the top, everyone could see it. People would gather around machines just to watch the best players. And some players became well known, not by their real names, but by the 3 letters they entered on the screen. And that created a kind of identity, a reputation inside that space. But arcades were not just about competition. They were social spaces, places where people met, where friendships formed, where time passed quickly without anyone noticing. After school on weekends, groups of friends would go to the mall, and the arcade would be one of the main reasons. They would stand side by side, play together, compete, laugh, sometimes argue, but always come back again. Even strangers interacted, sharing machines, watching each other, reacting to wins and losses. It was a shared experience, something that happened in the same physical space, and that made it different from anything that came later. Shopping malls were the perfect place for arcades. They already had crowds. They already had movement, and arcades added energy. They gave young people a reason to stay longer, to return more often. For many people, going to the mall meant going to the arcade. It was part of the routine, part of the culture, and for years this system worked perfectly. Nothing seemed broken, nothing felt outdated. Arcades were full, machines were active, and the experience felt irreplaceable. But then slowly something began to change. Not all at once, not in a way that was easy to notice, but step by step. Home gaming started to improve. Early consoles had existed for a while, but they were simple, limited, they couldn't match the experience of an arcade, so people still preferred to go out. But technology doesn't stay still. Consoles became better, graphics improved, controls became smoother, games became more complex, and something very important changed. At home, you didn't need coins. You paid once for a game, and then you could play as much as you wanted. There was no timer, no pressure, no one watching you. You could fail again and again without losing anything, and that changed behavior. People started spending more time at home, practicing, improving, getting better without the cost of failure. And slowly, the need to go to arcades began to decrease. At first, it was not obvious. Arcades were still full, still active, but the shift had started. Then came another change that made everything move faster. Online gaming. Now you didn't need to meet people in the same place to compete. You could connect instantly from your home. You could play with friends without leaving your room. And that removed one of the strongest reasons to go to an arcade, the social experience. It moved from physical space to digital space. At the same time, malls themselves began to change. Fewer people visited them. Online shopping started to grow. And the idea of spending hours walking around a mall became less common. And without that constant flow of people, arcades began to lose their main audience. And there was another problem. Running an arcade was expensive. Machines were not cheap. They required maintenance. They broke down. They needed space, electricity, constant attention. And as fewer people played, the income dropped. But the costs remained, and that made the business harder to sustain. Some arcades tried to adapt. They added larger machines, games with tickets and prizes, more visual attraction, trying to pull in younger audiences. Others focused on unique experiences that couldn't be easily replicated at home. But even that was not enough, because the core idea was still the same. You had to leave your home, spend money for each play, and wait your turn. While at home, everything was instant, unlimited, and more comfortable. And slowly, one by one, arcades began to close. The lights turned off. Machines were removed, spaces were replaced by something else. And the loud rooms that once defined the mall became quiet. And what makes this story interesting is how quietly it happened. There was no single moment, no clear ending, no announcement that arcades were gone, just a gradual change year after year. Fewer locations, fewer players, less importance, until one day they were no longer part of everyday life, and many people didn't even notice when it happened. Today, a few arcades still exist, but they are different. Some focus on nostalgia, bringing back old machines for people who remember. Others combine games with food and entertainment, turning the experience into something new. But they are no longer the center of gaming culture that has moved somewhere else. And if you look closely, the reason becomes clear. Arcades were built for a world where access was limited, where experiences required effort, where people had to gather in the same place to share moments. But today, access is instant, communication is constant, and entertainment is everywhere. And when something becomes easier, faster, and more convenient, the old version doesn't slowly survive. It gets replaced. The fall of mall arcades was not caused by one single invention. It was a combination of changes, better home systems, online connection, changing habits, and a different way of spending time. And just like many things before them, arcades didn't disappear with noise. They faded quietly, until one day the loudest place in the mall was gone, and nothing replaced the feeling it once gave.